This is a moment we've been waiting for. We'd like to introduce our special guest speaker, Rabbi Lachtman. Yeah, he's been in Temple Beth David in Temple City since 1976. So he's been there a long time. And if you remember, when we started to learn about the Judaism, Professor Lin introduced us that there are three major branches of Judaism. One is the Orthodox, and one is the Conservative, and the third one is Reform. And the Orthodox, perhaps you would know by whatever they wear and their behavior, you know that they're very traditional, and they really follow the law that came out through years. And Conservative Judaism is a middle line, and they have a relatively newer thinking, but they still try their best to follow the law. But there's the third one called Reform Judaism that we're really curious, like to learn about. And we're so happy that Rabbi Lachtman is willing to come here to share with us about this branch of Judaism. They're very open-minded. So Professor Lin and I went to visit him at the temple, and we had a very, very nice discussion, and we learned a lot. There are a lot of newer thinking, and a lot of new things that actually Rabbi said that many new things within the Judaism, that actually the Reform Judaism took the leadership position. Just like some women, Rabbi, and also, you know that Jewish boy, when they turn 13, they have a special bar mitzvah. But now the girls, the bar mitzvah, that's also they start. So I think with this, we're really more curious, like to learn what is Reform Judaism. And Rabbi is originally from San Francisco, and he's been in this area for a long time. And his congregation, he told us that there are some Chinese, or maybe Taiwanese, or Korean, Taiwanese in the congregation. That's very interesting. So let's have your time.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here. And it's a delight to hear you share some of the thoughts of other religions. And sometimes, when people belong to one religion, their ears are closed to other people, and their ears are closed to other thoughts. And doing everything, from the Dalai Lama on up, is very impressive. Judaism, we don't always view the same words in the same way. So I would say, what I tell our people is, there was a prophet called Micah. He's in the Old Testament. Micah, and he said there are just three things you need to do. Okay, just three things. So he said the first one is do justly. Love mercy. And walk humbly with God. And that's what we're required to do. And we believe that the world would be a better place if Jews did that and non-Jews did that as well. Because we come into this world and we can appreciate it. And someone can go outside and say today, it's not as warm as it was last week, and tomorrow is not going to be as cool as today, and you can complain about everything. But the idea is to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly each day and be at peace with ourselves and with God. And Judaism has changed over the centuries. So Judaism according to our calendar, we're in the year 5773. And we believe Judaism began in the year 1750 BC, and we use the letter E before the Common Era, before the Christian era. So we're about 1,700 years before this year, which is 2013. So we're about, 3,800 years old. We're considered the first monotheistic religion, or the oldest monotheistic religion, believing in one God, although God is seen as different things. You know, if I were to give you a pound of flour, you could make, I don't know if you know Play-Doh, you could make Play-Doh out of it. You could make noodles out of it. You could make bread out of it. You can make cookies out of it. You're limited by your imagination. And the same thing with the gifts of God. We can do many things with them. And we know there's some bright and brilliant people who've done wonderful things with their minds. And there's some bright people who've not put their minds to doing good things on earth. So when we look back at the years of the Third Reich, and we look back at a country who gave us what we thought was civilized, Bach and Beethoven, and the beautiful stories of Hansel and Gretel, could also give us crematoria, could also give us concentration camps. So being smart doesn't mean you're always going to do smart things with it. And some of the biggest crooks had tremendous intellect, and whether it's a Bernie Madoff or someone like that, they use their mind but not to help other people. And we try to tell people when you walk into this world, what will your life mean? And it won't be how much money you retired with or how much is in your 401k, but it's how many times you made the world a better place, an act of kindness. Now, most of us are not going to get written down in the LA Times, okay, or the Taiwan Times. Although it's interesting, I've got to get his name. My congregant's father had a full-page story in Taiwan when he died. He was a very important man. I'm trying to get his name for you. But most of us, it's the acts of kindness that we do. And whether it's helping an animal, whether it's helping a neighbor, whether it's helping a child, whether it's helping a new immigrant, God's not going to look to see how many times you had matzo balls. God's going to look to see how many times you tried to make the world a better place. So in our temple, again, we believe in helping people. And like you, we reach out. So we took in 3 families. I don't know if you remember the South Vietnam when it fell. We took in 3 boat people families. There were times when people had to leave the country and they couldn't stay or they get killed, so they went out on boats and into the harbors to flee. And why did we help people from Vietnam? That was a miserable war. We help them because they're God's children. Because we believe you do not stand idly while someone else bleeds. So that's an important thing. Don't stand idle. Okay, don't stand idle while somebody else is in trouble. It's easier not to help people, but it elevates the purpose of your life when you can help people. So we helped the boat people. We took them in, gave them free apartment, free food, and helped them find jobs, each of the 3 families for a year. How wonderful that is to help them. Now, they don't talk to us anymore. They've just gone on and they've sort of forgotten that what we did. But we know that what we did, and we know that we helped somebody. And we're all a nation of immigrants. Some of you weren't born here. I was born here, but my parents weren't born here. And we have generations that change. And in my congregation, I have, I think, 5 or 6 people who were born in Taiwan. we have about 8 or 9 people who were born in North Korea, and about 5 or 6 families who are from Japan. And then we have a few who are not from Taiwan, and I forget what part of China they were from. But they speak Cantonese. From Canton, okay, speak Cantonese. So it's a real mixture of people with different backgrounds and different sensitivities. And that's what's really important to us, and that's how Judaism has changed. So when I was a young rabbi, there wasn't such a thing as women rabbis. Our Orthodox brothers, wanted to literally, throw us out of the religion if they could. That was considered blasphemy. Our conservative brothers said you shouldn't do it, but we did it. And then about 20 years later, our conservative brothers took in women. And we have made those changes. And every time you make a change, someone's going to say, don't. And not all changes are good, but a lot of the changes were socially oriented. And that's what our religion is about doing social things to change our world. And so that's what Reform Judaism is about. And Reform Judaism has changed. Judaism has changed. Our Orthodox brothers and sisters would also agree that it has changed. We no longer do the animal sacrifices. We no longer do the agricultural sacrifices. We don't have the pans in which we burn the incense. We don't do that anymore. It's not what we're about. We're about people, and that Judaism should make your life better. I don't know how many of you saw Fiddler on the Roof, but it was certainly a very popular play. And it's based upon a book called Tevye and His Daughters. And one of the lines in the book is that he says, the world is changing. And this is in Russia at the turn of the last century. Okay, not this century, the turn of the last century. And when the revolutions were about to happen, and the world was changing, and Jews were supposed to only marry Jews. And part of that was because Jews lived in what was called ghettos. And the host culture didn't want to be in charge of us. What they wanted to do was they wanted to have the Jews take care of themselves, the marrying, the burying, the education, and they would collect the taxes. And so that's what they did. And so Jews were living in a very sheltered, very cloistered society. So only Jews could marry Jews, and a rabbi was not authorized to marry someone from the outside the culture. So when Tevye's daughter wants to marry a non-Jewish Russian soldier, his world sort of falls apart. And he does say earlier, if Judaism were to cause one hair on my head to be hurt, I would give it up in a minute. And when it came time for his daughter to leave the house, which is, I'm sure, hard for most fathers to see their daughters leave the house, he was supposed to consider her as dead. Why? Because she married out of the faith and out of the culture. And that was, in those days, a deterrent, but as much as a deterrent, it didn't prevent it. It was just a deterrent. And so when she goes to walk away, he doesn't look at her. And he doesn't look at his son-in-law to be. He looks the other way. And as they're walking away, he turns and wishes her a peace. So he turned away from his religion at the last minute because it didn't help him live a more abundant life. It didn't help him keep his family closer. And sometimes, that's a sign of when we need change, when that's happening. And when, in our country here, the slaves got to vote before the women got to vote. I don't know if you know that, but women didn't get the right to vote till after the black had their opportunity to vote. Kind of interesting. But women eventually, are getting more and more and more opportunities, and the roles that the women have used to be very narrow within Judaism. They were not to be educated, only in what they needed to know, but when it came time for higher study and higher learning, it didn't happen for women. So in about 40-something years ago, I had a chance to study with the most progressive Jewish woman. Her name was Nechama Leibowitz, and she wrote some books on Exodus, translating Exodus. Now, the book of Exodus is an important book for us, but when we studied it, we studied every word, we studied every letter, because the Orthodox believe every word and every letter comes directly from God. Well, you and I know it comes from people who wrote it down, and then we say that they were divinely inspired, but we don't believe every word. And every mistake in the Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, which is the core of our faith, has some mistakes in it, and has some things that are interpreted differently. And as I mentioned to Professor Lin before, I think when you came, there is a very famous line that says, in terms of it says an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And the Hebrew is ayin tachat ayin, which means an eye shall replace an eye and a tooth shall replace a tooth. And some of our more vengeful brothers and sisters, some of them, who might be Muslims, the radical Muslims, not the normal Muslims, but the radical Muslim, would say, if I poke out your eye, then you can poke out my eye. Which doesn't help a society when you have a lot of people who don't have eyes, because they're getting back at people. So what it really says, an ayin tachat ayin, and how's their Hebrew? Pretty good here? The Hebrew is pretty good? Not too good. It's like my Chinese, okay, yes. So it says ayin tachat ayin, which means an eye shall replace an eye, and a tooth shall replace a tooth. Well, in those days they didn't have the Julius Stein Eye Clinic at UCLA, so they couldn't go there. But what it meant is that if God forbid, I have your eye, you lose an eye, I have to be responsible to help support your family to make up for whatever you can't do because what you were doing before. And the same thing for a tooth, if you were to lose a tooth. We're all considered responsible, and if my ox, gores your ox, and I was warned ahead of time, then my ox gets put to sleep or euthanized. And so we have a real important sense of that. So Judaism keeps changing, and I like to think it keeps evolving to a higher level. Some people think it's going back. So when I changed our services from all English to about 30 or 40% Hebrew, did you think anybody said anything? Oy, did they say something? And they didn't like it. And when I brought in some of the new music, did they like it? Nope, they didn't like it at all. Rabbi, what are you doing? You're too young, you're too young. And I said, I think this is the only thing we're going to be singing. And then they got mad at the cantor for doing it. And then the cantor left, and now the cantor is considered one of the foremost musical voices for changing of music in the Jewish faith. So you ask any congregation, you'd ask any cantor, do you know my cantor? And they said, well, we don't know him, but we know his music, and we use the music really well. But my people wanted to run us both out of town, in the middle 70s and late 70s, because we were bringing in new music. And so change is always really difficult, even when the change is for the better. And sometimes you don't know whether it's for the better until 5 years, 10 years, 20 years later. And so that's why we have to have faith that things are changing for the better, and some of the things really do change. I grew up in San Francisco and spent my first 20-something years there. And my father had a grocery store in a place called North Beach. I don't know if any of you know San Francisco, but North Beach and Chinatown are together. And Chinatown, San Francisco used to be very formidable. You know, it was one of the largest condensed populations of Chinese people, you know, in the world. You know, outside of China, of course. And I was just back there a couple weeks ago, and you know, Chinatown has really grown, and the Little Italy part has become it's Little Italy now, because it has changed. And it's interesting, even in those days, so, you know, we loved good Italian food. And my father was a grocer. So sometimes I would have to deliver, you know, a case of lettuce, a case of carrots, a case of whatnot into these restaurants. And who's working in all the restaurants in the back? Chinese people. And they weren't the dishwashers, they were the cooks. And they were cooking all the Italian food all the time. So it was really, you know, again, I grew up in a city where I always thought that there was supposed to be a lot of Chinese people around. You know, a lot of Asian people, a lot of black people, a lot of Hispanics. You come out here, it's not so much in Southern California. They really had, you know, enclaves of different ethnic groups. And I think that's one of the wonderful things is that we learn from each other and we pick up, you know, wisdom from each other. So in Judaism, you know, one of the issues with most religions is how do you find salvation? How do you find rewards? And what is the right path? And we say there are many paths to salvation. There are many paths to truth. Just like there's many ways of doing something good with a pound of flour, there's many ways of doing something good with your life. And if you have challenges in life, then that makes you, I think, stronger. And it makes you able to handle what's coming your way. We believe that God doesn't give you more than you can handle. And sometimes my congregant says, God, I think God's going overboard. He doesn't know I can't handle this. You know, and I said, you know, God doesn't give you more than you can handle, and you will handle it, although you don't think so yet. And most of the time, the people, you know, do find the strength to handle the difficulties in their life. But that's what Judaism is about, to help us. So there was a wonderful book written many, many years ago by Rabbi Kushner, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Now, most people think the book's supposed to answer the question, why do bad things happen to good people? That's not the book, that's not the question, that's not the answer. The answer is what happens, you know, when the bowl of cherries is mostly pits and there's very little cherry. And how do you overcome that? And we believe our faith can very often help us overcome that. So within our country, within the United States, in the early 1850s, there was a group of group of German Jews who came here with the idea of reform. And did you have, Professor, did you have an Orthodox rabbi come in here?
No, conservative.
And, Rabbi Collins, right. So, if you had an Orthodox rabbi come in here, he'd have a beard and he'd have black clothes and black hat, and he would look like the Amish people, sort of.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah, they would. You know, again, they're very distinctive, and they live a 100% different life. Rabbi Collin and I are very, very similar. Our differences are slight. One of the differences would be that we would have more English in the service, and we give full rights to those people who are not born Jewish, whereas he might not give as many rights to them. But he and I are really good friends. He and I both spent a lot of time in the Army. Actually, he spent his in the Navy, and I spent 29 years in the U.S. Army as well. So I got a chance to deal with lots of people. But we are, as a community, all united because we live here together. The we pollute the air, we're going to suffer, okay? If we drive on the wrong side of the street, you know, we're going to suffer. And we have rules that apply to all of us. But Judaism's rules have changed. So in 1850 or so, between 1830 and 1850, when the German Jews came, they settled and they brought many of their Germanic ways. I don't know if you know about Germans, but Germans are, everything is, you know, like this, like this, like this. They're very orderly. There's very little interpretation. There's the way to do it. And then about 30, 40 years later, the Russian Jews came, immigrated to this country, and they were not so organized. And they were not, then of course, they spoke with an accent. And the German Jews forgot that when they came to this country, they spoke with an accent that they probably didn't use. And so the German Jews and the Russian Jews in the, you know, in most of the 1800s were always arguing with each other. And the Russian Jews were made to feel like they were second class. And the German Jews felt like they were aristocracy. And so that's, again, that's a real story. And our Judaism changed as well. And that's when Reform came in, because we wanted to put more joy back in life and more meaning. And then prayer, some people come to temple and they say, what am I praying for? And they said, you know, I had a lousy week. You know, the doctor told me I have X, Y, and Z, and it's going to take a surgery, and the surgery is sometimes successful and sometimes it's not. And God has given me, you know, the wrong side of the coin. And we try to tell the people that we're given challenges, and we try to meet them. And we don't always succeed. And when there's 30% of the people don't do well after a certain operation, you know, you might be among those 30s, but what do you do with that challenge? You've also had people who've gone in for hernia surgery and who died because the anesthesia was wrong, or the reaction to the anesthesia was wrong. And that sometimes can't be helped. But our religion is to give us faith and help to carry on. So when we go to a Jewish funeral, we don't say a prayer for the dead, we say a prayer for us. That we may have strength to continue on after the loss of someone we love. And that their memory should be our legacy. And if they have unfinished goals and tasks and dreams that they haven't done, may we carry them on. May their wishes become our reality. And that's really important. And you know, that's part of life. So we have, you know, one of our customs is that we have our families come every year on the anniversary of our death. And they come back to temple. And they come back to temple and talk about their person's life and things like that. And so that someone's life is not a blessing if it doesn't motivate other people to be better people. So I wrote down some things about our movement. You know, in the late 1940s, when Israel was about to become a state, you know, after the Holocaust, one of the big arguments was, how can we support Israel and still be considered Americans? And then what if Israel and America were to go to war, who would we fight with or fight for? And again, you know, they were really concerned about this. And even before, you know, the 40s, when Israel was going to become a reality, at the turn of the century, in the early 1900s, there was a congressman named Kahn. What was his first name? Julius Kahn. He was a congressman in Washington D.C. And he said we cannot afford to talk about Israel much because we don't want our neighbors to think that we are compromising our allegiance to America. You know, and I remember, you know, some of you, you know, might remember too, you know, with the Korean War, people looked at the Koreans differently. You know, how many of you have gone up to the Santa Anita racetrack and seen the, you know, the plaques to the Japanese who were interned, you know, in Santa Anita, the great race place. My son did a paper on that. race not being horse race, but being, a race of people. And that it was a place where, people were interned. And one of our congregants said they never saw their father cry, except when he was put into the internment camp at Santa Anita, because he felt he was a good American, and for people to put him into the concentration camp because he looked Japanese, and he was Japanese, but to think that he would not be loyal to the country that took him in as a child made him cry. And of course, years later, and that's why, sometimes, we need to welcome the stranger. And those of you who read the Old Testament know how important it is to treat the stranger in your midst better than you treat your own family. So if a stranger comes in, and you're having dinner, and everyone gets, a cup of string beans, you offer to the stranger 2 cups of string beans, because you want them to feel welcome, as opposed to feeling that they're taking away from your wealth. So as Reform Jews, again, during services, the men usually wear a yarmulke, such as I'm wearing. I wear it when I'm doing what I would consider teaching or holy things. I don't wear it all the time. The Orthodox Jew would wear it all the time. The Orthodox Jew on the Sabbath would not drive. They do not cook. They do not carry. They do not work at all because it's a day of rest. And the concept of Sabbath is important. But, so they can't smoke a cigarette because you're neither to create nor destroy. So what does it mean, smoking a cigarette? What are you destroying? Well, that cigarette, after you smoke it, it's not quite the same anymore. So there's one less thing on the world. They go so extreme that when I went to an Orthodox luncheon, I had forgotten, I'm looking, for the sweet and low, for the sugar substitutes. Yeah. I'm looking at them, and all the tops have been cut off. I'm thinking, what? Did they buy them wholesale, cheap? That's why they're already opened, or they fill their own. And then I realized that by tearing it open, you have destroyed it. You've destroyed something that was whole, and you made it broken. And even though it was to get out the saccharin or the splendor, whatever's in it, that's considered a violation of the Sabbath. For them. For me, it's not. The other thing is, if you go in to use the bathroom, and you want to use the toilet paper, on an Orthodox day, the toilet paper is already pre-torn. Because again, if it had 28 feet in it, you use the toilet paper, there might only be 26 and a half feet left, or 27. Well, you've destroyed that roll of toilet. Yeah, so you've destroyed part of it. So they pre-tear their toilet paper, and I guess they know who's cooking and how much they'll need, whatever. And the same thing with driving a car. Why wouldn't you drive a car? Because you're creating sparks, to ignite the gasoline in the chamber. And at the end of a drive on the Sabbath, where you might have had 10 gallons of gas in the car, you only have 8 or 7. So you've destroyed seven gallons that were previously there. Before the car age, let's say you wanted to go to the beach or something, and you took your camel or your donkey, and you had them pull you. The idea was that those are burdens, those are bearers or burden, they're beasts of burden, and you're not to make them work on the Sabbath either. They are to have a day off as well. And even though you are the master of them, you are supposed to take care of them and give them a day off so they can refocus on their lives. So in our faith, in our congregation of a couple hundred families, we have about 40% that are not, where the husband and wife were both not born Jewish. So 60% of our congregation were all born Jewish, 40% were not. And most of them is because of interfaith, interracial marriages. And so that's been an important part of our growth and our welcoming. Again, I grew up in a city like San Francisco where You know, I could show you my kindergarten pictures, and maybe out of 25 kids, 5 of us were, you know, Anglo, and the rest were all from, you know, other wonderful cultures. And we all learned that way, and we talked that way, and we appreciated it. And, you know, we loved being invited over for each other's holidays and stuff like that. And, we have a soup that's called Kreplach Soup, which is a lower form of, I'm sure all of you have had wonton soup before. You know, Jews are not good cooks. I want to let you know. So when they make the wonton, you know, however you call that, the dough is much heavier and much more difficult to digest. So if I had a choice of wontons or kreplach, I would take wontons in a minute, and the kreplachs would just go like this. You know, as wontons are light and fluffy, and you know, it's hard to find a bad wonton. I haven't found it, but I found lots of bad kreplach. But again, it's doing things with food on you know, on a much different level, and we are more open to it. So what happens is that our kids who have, you know, Asian family members, you know, make some of the Jewish food with an Asian flair. Okay, and I think that's wonderful. You know, we had our first Japanese rabbi about 25 years ago, and again, he came to the United States and went to the seminary and became a Japanese rabbi. The sad thing is he died about 6 or 7 years ago of natural causes. But again, you know, the face of Judaism has changed. You know, the young man who was our most recent, you know, bar mitzvah, you know, his mom is from Taiwan, you know, as well. And you know, he's a beautiful child, and they don't know the difference. And actually, my temple president's wife is from Taiwan, and I'm hoping to get the name of his father-in-law who died, so I could share it with you. But he was a very famous businessman, a very famous executive in. Did I get it? No, not yet. Okay. But again, he came here for the bar and bar mitzvah of his grandchildren. You know, again, very proud and very open, very very liberal, but appreciated you know, Chinese tradition very much, as I think most people do. What I would say, one of the differences is that you would not find an Orthodox Jewish congregation going out to help the boat people. You would not find them out helping with the Humane Society. You would not find them doing cross-cultural events. They believe take care of your own first and then everyone else. But we believe, you know, we are all God's children. And although we might look different, we are all God's children, and we have an equal obligation to help another Jewish child as we do to, you know, to help a child from Africa who is starving. Because we're all in this together. And so when someone comes to me and they say, you know, can you do a service for Dad? And he wasn't very religious. I said, really? They said, yeah, he hardly went to temple. And I said, well, there are a lot of good Jews who don't go to temple. And you don't have to go to temple to be a good Jew. But I said, what did he do? He said, well, he was a teacher all his life. And I said, you know, what's more important than being a teacher? I said, it's more important than being a baseball player, although it doesn't pay as much, or a basketball player. It's more important. And that's someone who touched not 20 lives, but hundreds and hundreds of lives over a 30-year period. So it's thousands of lives, not hundreds of lives. And you know, we have a real responsibility. Let me tell you the story. We believe we learn a lot through stories. There was a man, again, this is a Hebrew name, so it's not going to be a name that you're going to love. His name was Honi HaMegal. And Honi HaMegal goes back to a time where he was a circle maker. In other words, sort of like a pattern maker, but he would make circles and he would do them sort of like with a compass and go into parts of the countryside where people would need these shapes made, and he would make shapes or draw them for them to try to cut them out. And again, he was an itinerant person who went from city to city to city. So he's walking by the road, and he sees a very, very, very old man planting carob trees. You know what carob is? C-A-R-O-B? It's, Professor Lynn, do you have do you know this tree at all? It's a fruit, actually. You can find it in health stores, carob. It's like chocolate, okay? And it's supposedly better for you. Do you know carob at all? No. Well, next time you go to, any of you go to health food stores and stuff like that, ask them about carob. So it's considered a poor man's chocolate, or maybe a poor woman's chocolate, okay? But it grows, and it grows from a tree, and it's like a fruit that hangs down. It's so carob was very important because it was easy to access. You don't have to process it like you do chocolate. So this old man is planting carob trees, a very old man in the sun. And Honi says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm planting carob trees." He says, "Why?" And he says, "I love carob. It is so delicious." He said, "Old man, are you crazy?" The old man says, "Why?" He said, "Because it takes 40 years for the carob tree to produce a fruit that you can eat."
40 years.
40 years. They said, "Old man, you're going to be dead by the time the carob tree gives carobs that you can eat." He said, "Honi, when I was a little boy, someone had planted carob trees for me. And it's my responsibility to plant for somebody else." And that's our real sense. You know, why do we build buildings? You know, who put this together for all of you to enjoy? Someone did it, you know, and they didn't do it on your back, but they did it. And we have to be grateful that they set the stage for us. We have to be grateful someone set the carob. What are we going to leave for the next generation? How are we like the man planting the carob trees? Are we doing anything for the next generation, or is it all just for me, what we're doing today? And that's, you know, really the message of liberal Judaism. We call it which is tikkun olam. It means repairing the world. That there are places where things are broken. Are we going to repair them or walk away? We're certainly not going to call a serviceman because they're too expensive. But what are we going to do? How are we going to repair the world? We believe we are God's partners on earth. So if you see a beautiful field of corn, you know, where everything is lined up like this, or a beautiful field of wheat, or if you go by a vineyard, you know, with grapes, you see they're very orderly, one after another. You know that that didn't spontaneously happen. It's that people did it. But we also know that without the sun and the rain, that those grapes aren't going to grow. And we also know that without people to pick them and to harvest them and send them to the store or send them to the winery, it's not going to happen. And so we realize that for things to be good in this world, we need some of the blessings from God, and then we have to build upon them. So you have a choice of whether those grapes are going to be for jelly, or whether they're going to be for wine, or whether they're going to be for pie, or whatever. Again, you know, there's a really great chef who makes a grape pie. I've never heard of a grape pie. But he's the chef right across from the San Gabriel Mission. I don't know if you know where that is, but the San Gabriel Mission. And there's a place called Pizza Place, California, and he makes a grape pie. Never heard of it, but it was amazing. It was Amazingly good. As you can tell, there's very few things I haven't tried to eat. And so, it's like, you know, what do you do with your life? How does it make a difference? And if you have your health, you can do anything you want. If you don't have your health, you just give them lots of challenges. And that's our thing, is what do we do with our challenges? And, you know, and how do we shape our lives? I don't know what you have in terms of questions and things like that. Are there some specific areas you want me to touch upon before we do questions? Professor Lin.
The question will come after in the break.
Okay.
We will have the break.
Okay. So,
At that time, you answer the question.
well, I'll try to answer the questions. So, anyway, what we think all Jews would agree upon, they don't. So the state of Israel, would you think all Jews agree upon it? No. There are Orthodox Jews who believed, and this is how crazy some of them are. They're not all like this. But there's a group called the Neturei Karta who have a day of mourning, a day of sadness on Israel Independence Day. Because they believe Israel should be run by God. But we know, they couldn't survive the, God can't run the army. God can't collect the taxes, And one of the things within Judaism is not to charge somebody tax, not to charge somebody interest on loans. That one of the concepts was that if someone needed a loan to live on, then you cannot charge them tax. You can't charge them interest. But if you want to buy a third home in San Tropez, or a big villa in Hawaii, they can charge you interest. But if someone needs it for subsistence, they do it. Now you know that the term Sabbath, it means day of rest. It comes from the word Sheva, from Shabbat, which means a day of rest. And every 7 years, according to Jewish law, all debts are canceled. All money you owe someone else is canceled. All indentured servants or slaves are let free. And again, that's a sense of really being fair. So what they used to do is, if on the 5th year or the 7th year cycle you want to borrow money, and you want to borrow it for another house, in Hawaii, then you get charged interest. But if you needed the money to live on because things went bad, that was a different story. After 7 sabbatical years, or after 49 years, all land went back to the rightful landowners. So if your children lose your land, and your grandchildren don't get it because they lost it in a card game, let's say, the land would return back to the family after 49 years. Which was another interesting concept. But the idea was that I don't know if you've ever seen that, but there are families who get the money from the grandparents and squander it, blow it, so to speak. My father used to have an expression with some people like that. He said, he's lucky his father was born first. Because if his father hadn't been born first, he would have nothing today. And so, there's a real sense of Judaism that, what do you do with what you have? What do you do with the blessings that you have? And, people like Jacqueline Kennedy, who was married to President Kennedy many years ago. Do you know what percentage of her money she gave to her children and what percentage of money she gave to charity?
No.
Okay. She divided up her estate 20-80. Okay? She gave 20% to her children, 80% to charity.
Wow.
Now, my congregants, probably give 90% to charity. No, not 90% to their children, and 10% to charity. But that sets, I think, a much better example. But, she had a lot more money to play with. One of my friends was an executor. You ever heard of John Paul Getty? Getty.
Getty, yeah.
Right.
Getty, yeah, villa, yeah.
With the villa. So he had 7 relatives who each gave 200 million to. 200 million to each one. Not to all of them, to each one. 200 million. That's more than I make in a year. Right? And you know what he told me? He says a lot of them, it didn't empower them, it disempowered them. The people lost their drive to do good things, they lost their drive to work, they lost their drive to create, and they partied, you know, sometimes with drugs, sometimes with alcohol, and it ruined their lives, it didn't help their lives. And so, you know, that's why a lot of money doesn't always help. Again, Jackie gave 20% to her children, 80% to something else.
Wait, I thought their children got a lot of money from Manassas too, though, wasn't it?
Well, that's where a lot of her money came from.
Right.
Right.
But then her children got additional ones, totally separated from hers.
You know what? I don't know that he did that. I don't know that he. I know that he gave. I know that he gave, you know, money to his daughter. Became very, very wealthy. His daughter.
Son is to pass away, of course.
Right.
And
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah. What good is the money when you pass away? You know, it's terrible. But you don't know those things. But again, to be generous is important, and to help, you know, organizations and helping philanthropic places. You know, you look in our community. You see the San Gabriel shelter for the animals, very poor. You look at Pasadena; it's one of the richest ones in the country. And Pasadena, you know, handles almost as many animals as this one does, but they're doing it on a shoestring, and one of them is, you know, very, 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 very wealthy. So if you ever have a choice of which one you want to give money to, the one in San Gabriel needs a lot more if you're looking to help animals. But that's our whole challenge, is to make the world a better place. So, you know, the minimum thing we say in our Judaism is called the Shema. That's Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, Hear O Israel. The Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And although God is one, God can be called by many different names. And we believe that God is not a person behind a keyboard determining whether you're going to get you're getting a parking ticket, you're going to get a speeding ticket, you know, you're going to get a lottery ticket. God doesn't determine that, you know. And therefore, you know, when you see two teams getting ready to play and they're all crossing themselves, I remember asking my father when he took me to a San Francisco 49er game, because I'm Jewish, I said, why are they doing that? You know, what does it mean? And my father says, it doesn't mean anything if they don't score enough points. So, it's, you know, God can give people strength when things don't go their way. So one of the questions our kids always say, Rabbi, how could there have been a Holocaust if there was a God? You know, why would God allow that? You know, why would God allow Pol Pot to do what he did? I mean, the thing is that we're given free will, and we can either stop it, or we can perpetuate it, or ignore it. And most people try to ignore it. And our challenge is to don't stand idle while things are bad and going on. So it's not that God wasn't there, it's that people weren't doing godly things. So what, you know, if we're going to be inspired by God, we need to do godly things. And that can be, you know, just by doing small acts of kindness and caring, whether it's about animals, whether it's about people, whether it's about the environment, whether it's about people getting access to medical attention, you know, when they need it. There's so many things you can do in the world, you don't have enough time. You know, you can't be in enough places. But, you know, Mother Teresa, definitely not Jewish, but did good things, you know. Salk and Sabin, Alfred Salk and Lou Sabin, I think, who came up with the polio vaccine. When they came up with the polio vaccine, were they like Gates and said, hey, how much money can we make? No, they felt they found something. I don't know, was polio was ever in China? It was? It was, okay.
Everywhere.
So when I was a child, I remember we had polio vaccine, and it was on little sugar cubes as children. I remember we took it after once, I think it was 3 months, 6 months, something like that. And I thought how wonderful it is. And, it changed, the course of medicine, for people. I remember people who had polio lived in iron lungs. They had to be in them because they couldn't respirate properly. And they created it. And they said, to Salk and Sabin, you're like saviors. And they said, no, he says there were decades of people working together, putting together all this information, and we were at the right time, at the right place, when all the information coming together made a light go on. Hey, this is the answer. We can create a vaccine for polio. And so, again, what did they do? Did they try to make themselves wealthy? No, they tried to make the world a better place. And I'm not sure that Bill Gates has thought about that when he was making his company. Now he's thinking about it because he has so much. And better late than never, But that's our challenge as Jews, to do something meaningful. And on many levels. And whether it's being a good neighbor, a good grandparent, being a good parent, being a good example, encouraging other people to do things. But not to discourage the man who's planting the carob tree from planting the carob tree. You can't ask, what am I going to get out of it? What am I giving to the world? What am I doing to make the world a better place? And that's what we do as Jews. I don't worry about the dietary rules, as you can tell. Okay, the dietary rules where you're not supposed to mix milk with meat. You're not supposed to eat a scavenger. A scavenger is someone who eats off the bottom of the ocean. So you wouldn't, crabs or lobster or bottom-dwelling fish, you don't eat because they eat everything. And they could be very sick. We don't eat pigs the same way because they eat everything. It's not considered kosher. So we believe those are kosher rules are very important. Again, I don't go order a pulled pork sandwich because I wasn't raised like that. And to me, I don't have a great taste for it. Now, sweet and pungent shrimp sometimes, yes. But, again, that's because I had a taste for that. Or I like Cantonese food a lot. We feel those rules are not important. We feel the ethical rules are important. So when we look at the Torah, we look at the Bible, we don't see 10 commandments. Okay, we see 613 commandments. 613 commandments are in the first 5 books of Moses. And then you heard about the top 10, not David Letterman's top 10, but God's top 10, okay? Those top 10 are different than the other 603 because they're considered divinely revealed by God up at the mountain, okay, at Mount Sinai. So, Moses brought them down. And why did he bring them down? Because he wanted to share them with the people. And the commandments are divided. I don't know if you've noticed. Well, if I were an artist, I would say this is what the 10 Commandments look like. Okay, and they were on the tablets per se. And there's 5 on this side and 5 on that side. The first 5 have to do between you and your Creator. The second 5 have to do between you and your fellow human beings. So we have a Day of Atonement, which is called Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, in which we ask God for forgiveness for the sins against God. But our tradition tells us God only gives us forgiveness from God if we've taken care of all the people we've done wrong to. So there's a very famous story about Mr. Schultz. Happens to be Jewish. He started a coffee company called Starbucks. I don't know if you've heard of it. And when they were very young, they were mostly commercial. In other words, before they had the retail stores, they would do commercial, like to hospitals, to factories. And they were selling them in 20-pound bags. And how much a 20-pound bag would be now coffee, but they were selling 20-pound bags of coffee to the hospitals, to the factories, toward cafeterias and restaurants, because they could use 20 pounds. But then he found out that the machine that was weighing them was also weighing the container. Not just the coffee, but weighing the whole thing. So when they were sending out 20 pounds, it was 20 pounds including the container. He sent them out as 20 pounds plus the container. He thought everyone was getting 20 pounds of coffee, when in fact they were being cheated by about 11 or 12 ounces. So every time he sent out 20 pounds, he was really sending out 19 pounds, 4 ounces. So after a couple of years, they found this out, and they said, Mr. Schultz, we have a packaging and shipping error. And he said, oh, it's terrible. He said, how much did I make from that? And they said, well, you made about $380,000, in shortchanging them. So he says, perfect. I'll give $400,000 to the city of Hope in Duarte. Does that sound reasonable? And you know what his rabbi said? No. He said, City of Hope in Duarte can use it. That's right, they can use the $400,000. But how about all those other factories and all those people who paid for the coffee and didn't get it? What are they going to get back? So remember, it goes back to the concept of an eye for an eye and tooth for tooth. If you cause them to lose money, or are costing them money, how are you going to make it up? So what he had to do was, he had to send letters to all the people all the companies, the jobbers who bought the coffee, and put in extra coffee for the next year and a half to make up for that amount of coffee that wasn't there. So when people were buying 20 pounds of coffee, they're getting almost 21 pounds of coffee, but only being charged for 20. So that way he was able to undo, the advantage that he had and give it back to people who used it. So it's important to do good deeds, right? So if I steal your car and I give it to the City of Hope, Cars for Causes, is that a bad thing? Because, Cars for Causes, helps people. Well, the rabbis would say, no, you took her car, it's your responsibility to give her back the car. And if I want to give to Cars for Causes, I should give them my car, not her car. And the idea was, to create a sense of justice, but a sense of obligation. And we need to be generous. And that's one of the, it's not one of the 613 commandments, be generous, but it certainly should be. But some of the commandments are, do not put a stumbling block before the poor. Do not favor the rich or the poor in a civil judgment. Sometimes we feel the judge says, the rich person can pay the fine, it won't hurt them. So, some people would say that. But Judaism says no, it should be fair, and you shouldn't look at how much money the person has, or whether they can afford to pay the judgment. You have to look upon whether the judgment is correct and whether it's right. Yes?
I was led a little bit. Would you please define walk humbly with God again, and most importantly?
I never defined it. You didn't miss it. If you come early, you wouldn't have heard it.
How to place with it?
So how I would say to walk humbly with God means not to think you're so great. Never think that you are, the tops in what you do. Realize that you have lots of room for improvement. And realize that you're walking amongst God's children. And you shouldn't take advantage of them. And to remember what you've been taught. If that's for me, I'm not taking any calls. So walking humbly with God is to put yourself in other people's shoes. One of our lines we write in one of our Torahs in Temple is the line that says, "Dalif ne mi ataume," know before whom you are standing. And the idea is to treat everybody as though they are royalty. There's a Jewish scary story. It says there are 36 righteous individuals in the world that God has put there. And when all 36 people are being treated properly, the Messiah will come. And if you ever treat one of those 36 righteous poorly, you know, an atrocity will fall upon you. Okay. I don't believe that, but the idea was that independent. You know, the Christian concept, you know, don't just give them a fish, but teach them how to fish is the most important thing. And yeah, that's what we really do believe. That's something that we're supposed to do. What do you think? Any other questions before you eat?
No.
Or snack?
Snack.